welcome back to Legislative Update. I'm Nanette Bulabash, your host. I'm delighted to be here. The title said Sheboygan History, but it's more like Sheboygan Stories about Sheboygan history, because we are so honored to have as our guest today Mr. Bernie Markovich, my friend from the Sheboygan Theater Company, used to be called Sheboygan Community Players. He was a set designer for them, longtime businessman, longtime volunteer, Sheboygan Symphony, the concert series president, Library Foundation. He's done so much for this community. But here, he's talking about his memories of growing up in Sheboygan. This all came about because of a presentation I attended that was hosted by Travis Gross and the other wonderful staff at the Sheboygan County Historical Museum, and featured Bernie and Henry Young talking about downtown Sheboygan. So most of these photos do take place in downtown Sheboygan. He grew up here. He remembers a centennial from 1953. He remembers this very first slide we're going to show, the Sheboygan Chordettes, who are among our most famous celebrities who came out of Sheboygan. So that's going to be our first slide. So welcome, Bernie, and let's just go right to these slides because we've got some wonderful ones thanks to the Sheboygan County Museum.
Yes.
So we've got the Sheboygan Chordettes.
There they are.
There they are in their evening attire. Oh my gosh, so glamorous.
Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts.
Oh,
that's the first time I saw them.
National TV.
National TV, yes. And I wasn't living in Sheboygan then.
No, but you knew they were from Sheboygan.
Oh, exactly. And of course, my paternal grandparents were from Sheboygan. My mother grew up here, and my father. And so we were living in Milwaukee, and my grandparents had the television, and Arthur Godfrey was on, and here they were, Sheboygan. We were the only ones that knew about Sheboygan. Whenever the family would come out east to visit us, my dad was in the Army, and they'd come loaded down with bratwurst, and there was the little grill and all that, and we'd be in some park cooking these things, and all of a sudden there were people. They had no idea what we were cooking and what we were eating and all that business.
And you said you met them. What were they like? Were they nice
women?
Yeah.
Well, Carol Hagedorn is still alive. She used to have the trophy shop downtown. And they were enchanting. They were absolutely enchanting. But you know something? Now think about it. Well, you didn't grow up here, so you don't know. But we had probably one of the finest music programs. Oh, yeah. The town is filled with Germans. How we survived 2 world wars is beyond me. But the bottom line is we survived, and the music survived with us. Yeah. So you had music in both of the high schools. My mother graduated from Sheboygan Central High School in 1939. It was the first year of North High. So their reunions were always together because their freshman, sophomore, and junior years were together. But this music program, they had talent nights, both schools and stuff like that. So these music groups
they
were
came
encouraged.
Out of the Sheboygan School District.
They
singing,
came out, yes, Central High School.
Wow.
And so the thing is that it's interesting. I did a show with Dorothy Schwartz's son, Jeff, who's in charge of Schwartz. You know, they do gadgets or something down on the south side. But the thing was that she was one of the Chordettes. They all had stories to tell, but it was Sheboygan, Sheboygan, Sheboygan. And just to see something, you know, New York is New York. You don't expect it. But, you know, Julius LaRosa married some woman from Manitowoc, for God's sake. Charlton Heston came from Manitowoc. We've got our own people. Wesley Lau, who was on Perry Mason. He was a regular. He graduated with my mother. These are people, this is why I keep saying that, you know, people don't realize that they're part of history because you don't know who's going to. You could be the next president, the only woman president of the United States.
It's about time, I would say that.
Well, if you're looking for the job, it may be available. But I just think that you don't know who is going to leave your little town and take these memories with them. Because when they come back, it's the reason they come back, to see if it's still here. Right. And, you know, anybody that would come back now and see what's happened to our downtown and, you know, what used to be the Royce Coal Yards and all that, they just won't believe. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. It took them 20 years, 30 years to kill the downtown. It's taken that long to bring it back, but it's coming back. And it's because there are people with vision. But people with vision always have a sense of history. And so every time
that's a nice way to put it.
You hear Mr. Sandman, if you hear the original Chordette singing it, because there are fake copies out there. And Carol told me that, they don't get royalties on some of that stuff anymore. It's all in the public domain. But they were the first.
They were the first.
And there are people that collect Chordette memorabilia. In fact, we have a collection of it at the museum. That came out of Dorothy Schwartz's
It's phenomenal.
estate.
We should be very proud. So we have a couple of photos from we had several theaters in downtown Sheboygan, the Majestic. Rosemary Clooney was in The Stars Are Shining, so I don't know what year this was.
Yeah, and she did Red Garters there, but that was not the top of the line.
No.
You could get into the Majestic Theater for 12 cents if you were under 12.
12 cents?
And one was never really
my
quite
God.
sure how fresh the popcorn was. But the guy that owned the Majestic also owned the Wisconsin Theater, which was the old opera house. The Sheboygan Theater, which is now the Weill Center, was an atmospheric house. That's the one with the stars in the sky and the clouds and all that business.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm the president of the Sheboygan Concert Association, and I can tell you, I introduce every one of our artists at our concert series, and there isn't a single one of them that doesn't comment. And I make it a point to tell them that the Weill Center, the Arts Center, the Children's Museum, all done without a penny of Sheboygan taxes. That's how serious we are about the arts. The Rex Theater in World War II, the USO was downstairs because of Camp Haven. Where Whistling Straits is.
Right.
These soldiers would come to town on the weekend. And then, of course, the 880 was anchored right next to the 8th Street Bridge. That was an old minesweeper that the Naval Reserve used to use for training, but there were people that were attached to that. And so you had sailors on occasion. So there was a little wildlife going on.
So we have some storefronts coming up. Mullins.
Yeah, Mullins. That building is still there, except you won't recognize it because it is just south, just south of the Weill Center. That building is in the process of being rehabbed.
And next door, you can see, if you look closely, the headquarters for Senator Kennedy for president.
Yes.
So this was 1960.
Yes, well, that was a shoe store at one time, I think. No, that was the old ice cream parlor. But WKTS, Julian Yetzer's radio station, was upstairs in that building.
So I don't remember Mullins.
The first Walgreens in Sheboygan was downtown.
I do remember that, across from the library. I moved here in 1976 from Chicago.
And that was the beginning of Plaza 8.
Right, I know. I hear from people who still lament that.
Oh.
But, okay, then W.T. Grant, another
dime store.
Another dime store. You can tell the era from the cars going by. Next to that is a jewelry store. Can you read that?
It might have been. Oh, you know what that is? That was the old Immigs. Then it became Garrison's, and now it's Scroggins.
Okay.
You know what they've done? They've restored the top of that building. That's part of a little group down in the southeast corner of New York Avenue and 8th Street, going down to the Art Center. Woolworths, the big store, was across the street. That's, I think, vacant now. But Prangy's got to be so big, their whole accounting department was upstairs, the billing department in that Woolworth building, because they converted what space they used to use in the old store to sales space when they opened up the 4th floor. You know, every time they renovated that store, it got smaller.
Yeah. Well, I remember before the fire, how Prangy Ways was in the basement.
Yeah.
Ames, that was a women's dress shop.
Sure. And that was in the Weill Center building block.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then next, we have the Bank of Sheboygan. Look at those pillars in
and
front of the door.
And those pillars are riprap now. Right across the street was Citizens State Bank. Right. That was the Bank of Sheboygan. The two of them went together and became Citizens Bank of Sheboygan on the corner of 7th and Wisconsin Avenue, where Wells Fargo is now. Yeah. There was the most magnificent Second Empire brick mansion on that corner that eventually became the Elks Club. And when the Elks Club sold that piece of property to Citizens Bank of Sheboygan for their new building. That's when they built their new clubhouse out on Erie Avenue. And the Palladium at one time was the Eagles Club.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have a picture of the Palladium.
No,
But,
that burnt down as well.
that
That's the old courthouse sitting
Before
there.
our current one, which was built as part of the WPA program,
Right.
is that correct?
That's
the 30s.
replaced this one.
This one. Look at that. So this looks like what is in Manitowoc now. They
Right,
still have their
right.
original.
Well, it seemed like everything had to have a dome in those days if it was legislative.
Was it in the same location?
Yes,
As
but
current-
over some, because, you remember the street doesn't go through.
Right, right.
So,
Okay. Well, I think our current courthouse is pretty beautiful, too.
yes,
So, but this, I would have loved to walk through this. I would have loved to walk through the original Mead Public Library before the new
the
one
Mead
was built.
Public Library, I was at one time the president of the Board of Trustees. The history there is that was one of the Carnegie libraries. We got
Yes.
money from Andrew Carnegie to build the building. James Mead was the president of what became Security National Bank, the old German bank, and he was very active. He was entrepreneurial, and then he was on boards of other companies and stuff like that. And there's a whole series of paintings on the third floor at the library now
Yes.
of businesses that he was directly involved in. And he left the library a sum of money that the family contested. And it was in litigation for a good long time. And by the time it was settled, the money had grown to the point that they put a 3-story addition on the back of the old library. And that was still there when they tore it down. It's all part of the Art Center now.
Right, yeah,
But
right.
who knew?
Yeah, no,
You
and that's
know?
why it's called Mead Public Library.
Yes, rather than Carnegie's library.
Right, yeah, that's how the Kiel Library
Yeah.
got started, too. I was the director there. So some shoe stores.
Always shoe stores.
And this is the Sheboygan Theater. You could see on
Yes.
the right side of this
But now
photo.
look at the Sheboygan Theater. It probably occupies, let's say, less than 20 feet footage on 8th
Mm-hmm.
Street. The bulk of the building was way on the other
way
side.
back.
That's the part they had to pay taxes on. That's the high rent district when you're on the street.
Ah.
And so when you go to places like Milwaukee and those downtown movie theaters, these palaces all had office towers on top of them. That's what supported what was going on
I
downstairs.
see.
That's what we never had here.
Ah, okay. Coming up next is this. Oh, this is
That's
the
the
hotel.
Festi, yes.
Festi Hotel.
Eventually, they cut off all that top. They got rid of all that goofy stuff and leveled it out. But Liberace used to play in the
Yeah,
cocktail
you
lounge.
mentioned that. That's
my
pretty
mother
incredible,
tells of
the piano player.
of a very nice evening there that had painful repercussions the next day. She was introduced to a drink called the Zombie.
Oh, my God.
And I guess she practically became one, she and my aunt. But anyway, that was down there on the far end of the building, the dining room, the Parkview room.
The next slide, Scott, who's running our slides for us, is that on the bottom? I don't know if you can
Yes,
see that.
it's the dining
That was
room,
the dining
overlooking
room.
the park.
Hotel Festi.
Yeah.
So that was when you would go out for an evening. My mom used to tell this story, and you'd have dinner, you'd have dancing, you'd have nightclubs, you have several different bands. It was like a whole evening, and
Yeah.
you dressed up,
Yeah.
and you drank drinks
Well, you
with
dressed for
umbrellas
everything,
in them.
though.
Yeah, you did.
You absolutely dressed for at the top of the bank. Sky Garden was another one of those places, and they would have wedding receptions there and all that, and the food was so inexpensive. I mean, you look at some of those old menus, and the glass of tomato juice is 10 cents, and the whole meal is $2.50.
Now, is that what turned into Gino's, top of the first? Is
Yes,
that what we call it? I
eventually.
remember that. I had my
Yeah.
college from Lakeland College prom there.
Yeah.
And it was, or homecoming or something, some formal dance. It was just fabulous.
Sure.
To go up there. I mean, that
Sure.
was the best view in Sheboygan.
It was,
And now
but
it's all
except there
an
were no
attorney's
windows
office.
overlooking the lake.
Yeah.
North, south, and west.
How interesting. Why? What were they thinking?
Because the service elevators were all up the
Oh
back.
my
It looks like
gosh.
that Sky Garden part was added as an afterthought.
Oh, okay.
Because there was another, it was called Benedict's Heidelberg Club, and I think they had club rooms down on the 6th floor.
Oh.
There was a private dining room there that was serviced by that Sky Garden kitchen for the bank. You know, the thing is, the bank used to occupy almost that whole building.
I know, but at least you could go up, the public could go up and have a view.
Yeah,
Now that's
yeah.
not open to the public unless you have to see a lawyer.
Right,
It's just
right.
unfortunate.
And they're not up there anymore.
No?
They're down in the Nemshoff building.
Oh, well, who's up there on the top floor?
Nobody.
Oh, well, they should open it up to the public. Let's work on that. So Sears is next,
Yes.
city with another one of
But
those newsstands.
you see, look at the
mentioned.
top of the building. That was one department store that became two locations. And then that is, next to it is City News, one of the newsstands that were downtown
When
there.
people still bought newspapers in print.
Newspaper, yeah, and books. Now, that's the Woolworth building.
Yep, there's a Woolworth building. Just,
And then next to
do
it.
they have a lunch counter?
Oh, God, they did. They did, and a friend of mine worked there, and she had to get 14 slices out of a single tomato regardless of the time of year for the club sandwiches.
Oh,
They
okay.
had an ice cream and light lunches and stuff like that. Not like Kresge's up on the other block that not only had a hot dog counter, they had a whole lunch counter. Turkey dinners and all that kind of stuff. And of course, Prangies did it best because
Yeah.
they had the hot dog counter, they had the lunch counter on the first floor, they had the terrace room downstairs,
Oh, gosh.
and then eventually it moved up to the second level.
And their bakery, I remember
Yes,
the bakery.
yes, and they did catering and wedding cakes and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Oh, I
those
sure miss
hot
that.
dogs.
You make me want to go back. Geely Hardware, am I pronouncing that
Geely
correct?
Hardware, yes. Well, now Geely was a kitty corner from Prangies, and they tore the top floors off of it. You know something, there was also one called Prangi Geisenheiner. They were hardware stores, and hardware was kind of, Trilling is the only one left.
Yeah, oh, I know. No,
And,
everything comes in plastic
But like I said
packages from
earlier
China.
in the previous show, regardless of how much or how little you had to spend, there was someone there to take it. And so you have these old family names that the streets are named after and stuff like that. They were the original businessmen.
Right.
And so, you had the high-end jewelry store, you had the lower-end jewelry store and stuff like that. And depending on what you had to spend. And then there were the side streets that had businesses. It was busy. But now, I grew up partly on the south side, so South 12th Street was our main shopping center.
Oh, yeah.
We only went downtown at Christmas time and stuff like that.
Because there was enough to shop, enough what you needed down there already.
And every neighborhood, you had all of those
grocery
little
stores.
independent grocery stores, and you take maybe 10 of those independent grocery stores and you throw in a bakery and possibly a meat market within the next 20, stuff like that. And so the businesses were scattered throughout. But my grandmother, my grandparents, maternal, lived in Milwaukee. When my grandfather retired, they bought an old two-room schoolhouse in Oostburg and lived there. Every Wednesday, my grandmother would come into town with my grandfather, and they would go to White House Bakery on South 12th Street just to buy the peanut squares. But she bought her hard rolls someplace else, and the meat was at Poth's Meat Market. And, the stuff that people did, it's all gone.
Well, we still have Johnson's. That's a great bakery
Yes,
on
yes.
Superior.
But there's,
some others.
and they offer, they say, authentic Sheboygan hard roll, but only on Fridays.
Okay.
Those semels required special handling, and
So-
that's a whole different story. But they all made them.
What's this next photo? I don't recognize this building. It's on a corner.
That's the Sea Rice Coal Company. No,
Ah.
no.
This came up in your presentation, and,
You know what that is? That's the old German bank.
okay.
Isn't it?
German bank.
It looks
Okay.
like it. That's where the Executive Inn is now. And
Okay.
that's the inside of the Sheboygan Theater, Wild Center.
Right, you talked about that before it was renovated, and now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
still it's gorgeous what they did to it. Jooms, we still have Jooms.
No, we don't.
No?
No, it's out of business. But that Bratz girl that's got all the scented items,
Oh,
she
that's
moved
right,
across
that's
the
right.
street there. And,
Right, that's right. We did
these
have
buildings reinvent themselves. There was a fire there. They rebuild. It's just that, you go to Plymouth, you go to downtown Sheboygan Falls, and most of that downtown is there.
Well,
Here,
it's not-
Alfred Young Company.
Yep, right.
And that is
Clothing
Hills
store.
next door. But the Youngs own that building. So that apparently at one time, Sheboygan Dry Goods was owned by the Young family, but maybe a different branch.
Okay. The next photo, it must be a little earlier from the date of the car. Those look like 40s cars, but I could be wrong.
Well, now that's the Weil Center block, I think.
Okay.
This is the alley.
The Children's Museum is sort of to the right
Well,
of that.
Mullins is the building next to it, I
Okay.
think.
All right. And how about next door? The next photo. This is a tavern?
That's the Knievers Hotel.
Oh, that's the Knievers
You
Hotel.
crazy woman.
Oh, how could I not know that? I would have loved. And where was that?
That was on the corner of Water Street and Penn Avenue. It was the northeast corner. It was a railroad hotel. So mostly men lived there that worked for the railroad and stuff like that, because that was right across the Penn Avenue Bridge. And their claim to fame was the dining room. Now, they made breakfast for the people that lived in the hotel, and they would pack their lunches. But in the evening, the dining room was open, and everything there was made from scratch. They made their own pickles and stuff like that, things that you wouldn't even be able to do today. But the place would fill up with people, and the first thing you did in that lobby, you went to there was a tray full of glasses and I don't remember if it was a drinking fountain or a faucet, but you got a glass of water and you waited until they turned on the light in the dining room, and then this stampede would go in there for the tables. And they had 5 things on the menu every night, always roast beef and roast pork, homemade mashed potatoes that were riced before they were mashed. It was absolutely incredible. The most heavenly gravy you've ever eaten in your life. And it was $1.75. It was just amazing.
And I know you don't want to talk politics, but Knievers was known as a socialist hotel. My friend Cindy Knievers has photos of her grandfather,
Yes.
with Carl Sandburg, who worked for one of the mayors in Milwaukee. I didn't know this, but he would come up to Sheboygan. He would speak at Fountain Park at socialist events before it became a dirty word.
There was a lot of that in the 30s.
And they would meet at that hotel, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and heard those conversations talking about garbage collection and sewer systems and workers' rights
we
and
had all
public
that.
funding. Yes, we did.
I started kindergarten at 4 in the afternoon. The situation in those days was 4 afternoon kindergarten, 5 morning kindergarten, 6 first grade. My dad is in the Army. We're living out east. After World War II, he decided that he didn't want to stay at the Kohler Company. He went back into the Army, and we're living out there. They don't even know what a kindergarten is because they were all Italians, no Germans. And so
right. We
I
founded
started
kindergarten
first
in
grade
the
when
state.
I was 5. I was 16 at the start of my senior year, 2 years younger than most of my classmates. And it was all because of that. But I could read,
Because of our good schools, which were funded publicly. 5 minutes left.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, where'd the time go?
And that's where
What's
the
next?
garbage collection came. You didn't need socialists for garbage collection.
Tell
You
me
just
about
need a lot of
Chris.
rats.
Tell me about Kresge's. That's our next photo.
Kresge's. I have a sister that's 21 years younger than I, and if you went to Prangies and bought a sweet little dress for her, it would be $12, and it would just be a little A-line skimmer with puffy sleeves and maybe a Peter Pan collar with 3 little rosebuds right here. For $3, you could go to Kresge's, and you not only got the frilliest dress you've ever seen, there was a
that's
matching
wonderful.
hat and rubber-lined pants that had 8 million ruffles on the bottom of it.
I remember
That
those
was
ruffles.
the difference. And you could, right next to that, you could buy the Hartz Mountain Canaries and goldfish and whatever.
So
but
this
hot
was
dogs
more
between
affordable
the doors.
stare.
It was.
Oh,
It
how
was.
fun,
And
how
then
fun.
farther up the line was Grant's.
Okay. This
Cress
photo,
Hurdle.
Cress Hurdle, men's
Okay,
clothing.
now that is all in the library block, so
Okay.
Cress Hurdle is gone. Cress Hurdle eventually moved across the street when Woolworths left. They went into the bottom of the Woolworth building.
Okay.
And right next to it used to be Richmond Brothers. So Richmond Brothers was for the young people, students, Art Imig pretty well took care of high school, college wardrobes, young men's wardrobe, and then when you got to be old enough that you really needed a really nice suit, you went to Cress Erdel.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could get it all in Sheboygan.
All of it. No, there's the Mead Library.
There's the Mead Library.
Oh, God.
We still have the shell of it at the Art Center.
Yes,
That was a
thanks to me.
And really?
I was at a
fun for
meeting when they were getting ready to
Tear down the
tear
whole
everything down, and I said, you know, even if you only save part of the facade, everything is gone. All those wonderful houses are gone, and the stuff that was in them were gone. The Zion Church wanted a parking lot or something like that, and they
Okay.
tore down an old Sheboygan mansion. They didn't save as much as the hinge off of that.
I'm glad
It was
they
easier
saved
to
it.
pay the fine than it was to go through the paperwork.
I've been to concerts inside that complex, and it's so fabulous.
Yeah.
It's just a fabulous stage with the garden and the artwork and the sculpture. Well,
You're
thank
talking
you.
about the Art Center.
The
Yeah,
Art Center,
yeah.
what's left.
Yeah, what's
thank
left.
you for your role in making sure that
And
it's
this,
the facade of the
there
building.
are two stories here. This used to be Mr. Glenn's, and his claim to fame, it is now, it's a high-end cocktail lounge on the corner of Michigan and 8th Street, southeast corner.
Oh,
Mr.
Urbane.
Glenn's
Oh, yeah.
used to,
This is it,
yes,
Urbane.
Urbane.
Yeah.
Mr. Glenn used to fill the whole bar with sand. All of August was a beach party in that band.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know how he got it all out,
How
but
did
he
he get
always
it
did.
out?
But it was
And
a
what's your
fun
other
place to
story?
go. Well, there was a saloon on every block, if not two, you know,
Yeah,
cocktail lounge, high-end, low-end.
That was well
And
known.
Chong Yep, the first Chinese restaurant, was in the back room.
And later there is a
That
photo,
was
but I don't
the
think we're going
original
to get to it.
post
This
office.
was the post office. Same place where it is now?
No, it's gone.
Oh, no.
That's on the corner of 8th and Virginia. Central High School is
Okay.
up on the corner. And then you know what
okay.
else is there? Young Shoe Company is down at the other end of the block, and the old Sheboygan High School.
Okay, 2 minutes left. Oh my gosh, so many more photos than we have time for.
Well, now that's the old opera house that became the Wisconsin Theater.
Okay, Opera House.
And
at Eagle
everything
Hall.
used to happen there.
Oh, gosh.
Famous people came to sing and all that. People's is still there. That's now the Children's Museum.
Okay, okay, yeah, you're right. And they've preserved that building.
Yes.
That's so good. And then we have a photo of, we think, police officers in front of the police station?
Well, no, that looks like the post office.
Postal Service,
Yeah.
okay, oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I recognize the
because the
brown
City Hall
doorway.
is where the police station was.
So,
Here's Richmond Brothers, isn't it?
and Richmond
Yeah,
Brothers.
I think so.
Right,
Yeah.
and then next door is a bank. So, and 2 more slides, Scott. We got
That's
one more
Security
minute.
First National Bank with
And then-
Sky Garden / Benedict's Heidelberg Club at the top.
And the coffee shop, and then the final slide we're going to show, Scott, is the one that has hamburgers for 17.5 cents. So you always had to buy 2. That was, what was the name of that drive-in? Can you remember?
I have no idea. Well, this is the backside of Timmy's where
That's
you could have
right.
got 6 for $1.
Oh, my goodness.
No, goodness had nothing to do with it.
So
They were
what do you
little
miss the
pellets.
most, Bernie, in our 30 seconds left? What do you, if you could go back in history and just get one thing
More
from
than
your
anything,
childhood?
I miss the comfort of all of it always being there. That you would walk down that street, every time you went, there was a new memory of some kind. You know, the 25-cent tulip sundaes at Woolworth's, 2 hot dogs for a quarter at Prangies. There used to be a dime a piece, and then you could get the root beer for a quarter. These
so
boys,
many.
we had an hour and a half for lunch at Central, and so
I'm sorry, we don't have time to talk about it. We're going to have to do another show. I'm so sorry, Bernie, because there's so much I want to just pick your brain about.
I'll tell
your
you
heart
about
and your
Cora
head.
at the
I want
Prangy
to hear
hot dog.
about, I want to hear about Cora's. We're just going to have to do another show because we've run out of time. This is Nanette Bulabash. Thank you for joining Bernie and me. You can see he's just a fountain of knowledge. So many. We have to remember our history. If you have photos, digitize them, preserve them, find a way, because future generations have to know about the history that you are creating right now. Thanks for joining us.